In this video, we're going to take a look at several column and row tips in Excel. These are very handy when we want to make sure that our data is visible, easy to read, and we're just looking at the data that is important to us. Now, the quickest way for starting with our columns will be to either double-click in between columns to get that to auto-fit. If we have multiple columns that we can see are not formatted correctly, we can highlight all of our data set or those specific columns and double-click between any of the columns up above. Now we'll automatically resize all the columns. Now, if we undo that, there's also a handy shortcut, which once again, if we're either highlighted on a specific column or all of our data set, we can use Alt HOI to auto-fit all of the columns. Now, same thing applies for rows. So if we notice that there are some row heights that are off, we could double-click in between those, or select all of our rows and double-click. And we could also use a handy shortcut. So if we select all of our data once again, then we can use Alt HOA, which will then auto-fit all of our rows. So there we can see that now our data set, all the columns and rows are now uniformly auto-fit. Now, let's say there was some data in here that we weren't interested in and it's just taking up extra space. So one thing we can do is go ahead and hide data. So we could select our columns here if we weren't interested in this data, then right-click on any of these headers and hit hide. Then to unhide that, we could then highlight over where the data is being hidden, right-click again, and hit unhide. And there's also another shortcut that we can use here. So if we hit Alt HOUC, that will hide. And if we wanted to unhide with our area selected, we could do Alt HOUL to unhide our data. And the same thing applies to rows. So we could select one or several rows. And we once again could right-click and hide and unhide, or we could use our handy shortcuts and use Alt HOUR to hide the rows. And once again, if we want to unhide, we could do Alt HOUO to unhide. So if there's any data that we weren't interested in, that could just help keep it more streamlined. Now, another handy thing to know is if we want to add columns into our data set, we could select a column that we're interested in and hit Control plus to add a column to the left. And we could hit Control plus to add several. If we wanted to remove those, we could hit Control minus. And if we wanted to add multiple columns at a time, we could highlight 3 columns in this case and hit plus, which will add 3 columns. Then we could remove those. And the same thing with rows. So if we wanted to add rows, we could highlight a row and hit Control plus to add as many rows as we want. And holding Control and hitting minus, we could remove those rows, as well as add several rows or remove several rows at one time. So those are some very handy tips working with column and rows to make sure that your data is easy to read, formatted correctly, and you're just focused on the data that you're interested in.